Welcome back, everyone, to this episode of the Batfoot Podcast. My name is Damien here with my co-hosts David and Matt. We're going to have some housekeeping news with managers and a potential extension. We'll do a wild card breakdown and then some division series predictions. But before we get into all that, how you doing, David?
Doing all right. Birthday's tomorrow. We'll have to enjoy the day off from the podcast, but and enjoy some playoff baseball. But for now, it was an exciting weekend. Baseball front, football front. It's all in full swing right now. Just a lot of sports going on. What about you, Matt? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Just had a good, good couple weeks watching some baseball. Enjoying not having to play in the wild card round this weekend. That was nice. And watching those games is a lot more fun when you're not stressed out. But yeah, I mean everything's great. Looking forward next week. I won't be here. I'm going to the beach next week, so that'll be fun. But I'll be watching some baseball. Super excited for the division series, so it's gonna be great.
Yeah, it's gonna be some really fun baseball. We had a lot of fun baseball that we'll break down here. But before we jump to the actual on-field happenings, we have some quick housekeeping news with the manager news that happened this week. Mike Matheny was officially announced as being out of his managerial role of the Kansas City Royals. And then with the Angels, Phil Nevin signed a 1-year extension. He was the interim manager that took over this year. And with they're going to basically take that interim tag away. With the Angels in a potential sell mode, it sort of makes sense to them to sign Nevin to a 1-year deal, so the next ownership doesn't have a lame duck manager.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can start with Matheny. Yikes, he was bad, and he was bad in St. Louis, and I was not surprised when the Royals added him because of the way the Royals are, but the Royals are probably going to start to change the way that they're thinking in their front office now a little bit, and Matheny doesn't fit into what they're going to do, so not surprised at all about that one. So
Rob Thompson deserves that job in Philly. He just won a wild card
yep.
series for the Phillies, and I think they definitely started playing better once Girardi was kind of kicked out. And I think you're going to see kind of a trend on this. I mean, these are three kind of old school managers, and Joe Madden, uh, Joe Girardi, and Mike Matheny getting kind of ousted for the younger, player centric talent that Phil Nevin for the Angels is also really young. He's only in his 40s. He's been around forever. I mean, I can remember when I was a kid, he was playing on the Padres. So, um, these guys have kind of earned their spots, and I like that these teams are going with the incumbent guy. Um, it's a good move in my opinion because it seemed like the Phillies took a big step forward, and the Angels definitely took a little step forward. They certainly righted the ship after losing all those games in the early spring. So good moves for these guys, and the manager situation for both of those teams is a lot more clear going into maybe a sell period for the Angels and a buy period this offseason for the Phillies.
Yeah, I do have one comment on Nevin too, in that I do feel like while he is a little bit younger, I looked it up. I think he's 51, so he's not an old manager, but he is a very old school type manager. He's more like a Girardi or somebody. I mean, I don't know what kind of school Joe Madden is, but Phil Nevin's a lot different from Joe Madden, but he is a more old school style manager. So I don't know what that's going to do for the Angels, but it's definitely a change, and they need a change in a positive direction. And I do think he helped with them a little bit this year, so we'll see what happens with him going forward. But kind of interesting moves there. So
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and jump to the wild card spot because I didn't even mention Rob Thompson there signing his extension, but we'll go ahead and jump to his Philadelphia Phillies against the St. Louis Cardinals in their series, winning the first 2 games, eliminating the St. Louis Cardinals, ending the careers of Albert Pujols, Yadier Molina, and potentially Adam Wainwright. We're still not sure on that front, but Rob Thompson and the Phillies sweeping the Cardinals in St. Louis for the wild card series.
And they did it, with kind of the inverse devil magic. We all thought, or at least me and Matt thought, that the Cardinals would be, able to find a way to kind of sneak their way through the series. But the Phillies, came to play in that second game. In that first game, they were down 2-0 in the ninth inning, and the the Cardinals rally or the Phillies rallied. The Cardinals made key errors by one by MVP candidate Nolan Arenado. Just kind of crazy, but tell me, I'm just not surprised that a team that started Jose Quintana and Miles Michaelis in you know the playoff series didn't win. Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler were really good, and yeah, Phillies moving on. I'm not surprised by that because I did say I just kind of picked the Cardinals because I wanted them to lose, but it's good to see the Devil Magic get swept out of there.
Yeah, I think I honestly don't think the starting pitching was St. Louis' problem. I mean, Quintana was pitching a gem in Game One, and they pulled him early. And I think Michaelis wasn't pitching too bad. I mean, he didn't have the best game ever, but he wasn't pitching bad. So I really didn't think the pitching was their problem. I thought that the problem was their stars that we thought all along, like their stars are gonna hit. It's just a matter of if are they gonna be able to pitch enough. Their stars didn't perform. Nolan Arenado in his postseason career now, he's been in he's had 33 plate appearances in the post or at bats in the postseason now, and he is 5 for 33 in his career. He had 5 games when he was with Colorado, and this was his third game with 3 games with St. Louis. In this series, he was 1 for 8 in this series, and Paul Goldschmidt wasn't much better. I think Paul Goldschmidt actually might have been worse. So it's, your stars didn't hit, and that was a problem for them. I mean, their 2 runs came off a Juan Yepez home run, which was devil magic. I mean, they did have devil magic, but their stars didn't produce. And it kind of sucks to see that Adam Wainwright never even got a chance to pitch in this series, in his last series as a big leaguer, possibly before retirement, and then Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina going out in a series like this. But um, it's one of those things too. I mean, the Cardinals. I mean, Yadier Molina this year was not very good. I mean, he had like a 50 WRC plus, and he came up as the final out in Game 1, and in Game 2 he came up to be the final out. He actually got a single, but it's one of those things that's like, man, Yadier Molina, you don't really want that guy being the guy in the postseason, like when your season's on the line up to bat. I mean, it's just doesn't it's just not great. So but kind of relying on those guys hurt them. But the biggest thing to me was in Game 1. I mean, Arenado botched a ground ball. Goldschmidt made a bad play on a ground ball where he probably should have just taken the out at first. They ended up scoring the run that would have tied the game after he gave them more runs by trying to throw the plate. Um, I thought that, but Ryan Helsley being kind of trying to pitch injured and not pitching well, walking guys, and I mean it was just a meltdown from the Cardinals in Game 1. In Game 2, they were just, you could tell they just weren't there. The pressure was getting to them. They choked. And the Phillies, I mean, this is their recipe was pitch Wheeler and Nola, and if they pitch really well, we'll find a way to score enough runs to win, and they did that Games 1 and 2. So congrats to the Phillies. It's been a long time coming for them. So
It's funny to me the dynamic here because Matt is a Braves fan, hates the Phillies. I'm a Cubs fan, hate the Cardinals, and so we both have a little bit of a different a perspective on this series because of that. But just I looked up Paul Goldschmidt's stats: 0 for 7 with a
yeah,
hit by pitch and 4 strikeouts. Just not enough there from the maybe the NL MVP.
yeah,
Yeah, and for me, it's like when I picked the Phillies, I just trusted the offense more, and that's sort of what it came down to, is that they were able to find the way. The Cardinals were around the Stars, and you guys have mentioned the Stars really didn't produce, and they don't have enough depth around the rest of that lineup to really, pull themselves out of that. But moving on, I don't know which series that we're going to go to was more wild out of the next three. I guess we'll go ahead and start with the Rays and Guardians. In Game 1, Jose Siri hits a go ahead homer, to give the Rays a 1-0 lead. Jose Ramirez hits a 2-run homer to end up, it was the game winning homer. They won 2-1 in the first game. Dominant pitching performances from Clanahan and Shane Bieber. And then in Game 2, that was a wild game. It ended up going 15 innings with 14 of them being scoreless, and Oscar Gonzalez hitting a walk-off homer against Corey Kluber of all people to send the Guardians onto the division series.
yeah. This series, it didn't go. It went pretty similar to what I was kind of thinking. the Rays. I kind of expected it to go to a game 3, but both games were so close. It very well could have. Both these teams really close. I mean, Cleveland's offense is just not gonna hit great pitching. They're just not quite talented enough. They have a couple good players that can do it, and that's what we saw. I mean, their star hit the home run in game 1 that won them the game. Game 2, I mean, Oscar Gonzalez has been one of their better hitters all year. But we'll see. The pitching was the big deal here. I mean, game 1, like I was praising Shane Bieber last week, and I mean, nobody's talking about that guy anymore. He had that fantastic short in 2020, and then he was injured part of the year last year. People were saying the sticky stuff was why he was doing so good, but he's come back this year and been the same guy. He's not throwing quite as hard as he was in 2020, but he's been just as effective. And I think that that's something that your people aren't really paying any attention to, and I guess because he's in Cleveland, or I don't know. But Shane Bieber is an excellent pitcher. McClanahan ended up being fully healthy. That's something I was kind of worried about coming in. And then, I mean, game 2, it's kind of the same thing. You got Tristan McKenzie, who's had a great breakout year, and I mean, and the Cleveland bullpen has just been outstanding. And we knew the Rays were going to pitch well, but this was two teams that have struggled offensively and pitched really well all year, and it ended up being that way. And I was, it was very, very entertaining to watch some good pitching in this series. And man, 15 inning game. We haven't seen much of that this year with Manfred Ball being extra innings, but um, that was 1-0 in 15 innings. I don't think that's the first time that's ever happened. So hats off to the Guardians of being like insanely good at pitching in this series.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't mention.
Go
Sorry,
ahead,
David. I just realized one thing we didn't mention is you mentioned the Manfred Ball there in postseason. There's no ghost runner at second base, so that was all natural baseball from then. But go ahead, David.
No, yeah, I was looking up a stat for this one because I'm the only one who picked the Rays, and I was kind of like, well, look, this series was really close, right? The Rays were a slightly better offense by WRC plus alone in this season. But the Cleveland team had a higher average. What I was looking at was the Guardians have a 129 isolated power this season. Isolated power is slugging minus batting average, just how many of your hits are extra base hits, basically. And as a team, Cleveland was 28th in isolated power. I would not have expected this series to result only in runs via Cleveland home runs on their offensive side, right? This is the kind of series I would have expected them to lose. Was they only hit 2 home runs? That's all the runs they get. But the pitching was so good. The bullpen was great, and Cleveland's bullpen is one of the best bullpens in the country. I think the rest of the way, you've got guys like Eli Morgan, James Karinchak. I mean, they were number 4 by WAR this year. Emmanuel Clase, Trevor Stephan, a lot of really talented arms, hard throwers, guys who are going to get those ground balls. I'm not surprised that they shut the Rays down. I just would have thought the Rays, kind of were going to counter shut down the Indians or Guardians a little more. Didn't happen, man. The pitching for the Guardians was absolutely electric, and now they've got to go and shut down the Yankees. So it's going to be a lot tougher for the Rays. Their model just doesn't seem to be resulting in playoff success. They made the one World Series, but it's really tough to constantly have to turn over your team year after year and rely on unproven players.
One note in this series too that I think is not too many people have talked about this series just because of being the Rays and the Guardians. There weren't quite as many storylines because the others had, the Pujols story and then the Mets story and then the Mariners being in the playoffs the first time in forever. This series got overlooked a lot, but Randy Arozarena had been just a insane playoff player like in the past, and in this series he was 1 for 9 with 5 strikeouts. So I think that really hurt the Rays. They needed him to have a big series with him being the insane playoff guy he has been, and he just didn't. So
yeah, and they didn't have Brandon Lau. That's another.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. I mean, they're ravaged by injuries too. I mean, no Brandon Lau. I mean, I know that Wander Franco played. He also went 1 for 9. But Wander Franco has been battling a hamate bone. He had surgery earlier this year, and he's just hadn't been fully back to normal yet. So the offseason's going to help the Rays. I mean, they're guys that, you talk about their guys. They don't have. I mean, their guys have been banged up all year. They're proven playoff players, like Wander Franco, who did play, but he's banged up, and then Brandon Lau, like that's their guys, and they just weren't healthy. So maybe next year with the healthy Rays team, they can get back there, but we'll see.
Shout out to Tyler Glass now before we move on too.
Oh,
What a
absolutely.
performance! 5 innings coming off of the injury. Only got 6.2 innings in the regular season. Came out there and gave Tampa a shot to win that game. So
I cannot wait to see
huge.
him. Cannot wait to see him and Glass and McClanahan head up a rotation next year. It's gonna be insane.
It's going to be really fun to watch. But now moving on, we're going to jump over to the other AL series we had, which was the Seattle Mariners versus the Toronto Blue Jays. Game one, Mariners jump on Alek Manoah for 3 runs in the first. And then I guess the story of the rest of that game was just Luis Castillo looking like an absolute monster. And then probably the most fun game we've seen in the playoffs in recent history, I would say, is that game 2, where Toronto was leading, 8-1 at one point. Seattle scores 4 in the 6th to make it 8-5. Toronto scores another one in the bottom of the 7th to make it 9-5. And then the Mariners score 4 more in the 8th and 1 in the 9th to end up winning that 10-9 and sweeping the Toronto Blue Jays in Toronto.
What a crazy series.
I was gonna start. I was gonna say, go ahead, David. You can go.
I was gonna alternate, but it went just like how I said, right? The Robbie Ray got lit up. I knew that was coming, but the Blue Jays bullpen absolutely blowing it, and with the collision in center field in that second game, just everything broke so poorly for the Blue Jays and so well for the Mariners. Man, that second game was, one of those we'll look back on in years and be like, remember that comeback, the 8-1 comeback? The way you look back at the 2004 Red Sox coming back, the 2016 Cubs, bunch of those. This is one of those comebacks where that team was down and out, going to have to play game 3, and man, the Mariners, dude, they finally make it to the postseason and they win a series, and of course now they get to face the Astros. So not the best, but huge performance from Luis Castillo. J.P. Crawford had the big hit. Cal Raleigh was amazing again. Guy has absolutely turned it on here lately. Mariners, it's going to be tough to pick against them, even though it's the Astros, just because the Mariners feel like, that team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like I said, I mean that was kind of my call going into this series, was just that the Mariners were like, I felt like they were it. I just, for whatever reason, and I'm a big numbers guy. I mean, most of the time when I'm looking at baseball, I'm talking about numbers and using stats and everything, but just for whatever reason, it feels like the Mariners just, they have something about them this year that I don't know. At some point, they won't. I don't think they're going to be able to overcome it, but yeah, I will say that I think that um, when it comes to Toronto, I think that Alek Manoah was not the right guy to pitch in Game 1. I felt like Gausman has been the guy all year, and he's the guy that needed to set the tone. He's obviously, he had a 238 FIP on the season, had 6 wins above replacement. Like, I know he had a 335 ERA, but Manoah had been pretty lucky all year on balls in play. So I felt like Gausman was kind of the guy. He's been there. He pitched in the postseason a lot last year. Manoah's a young guy, and man, getting off to that start in Game 1, pitching Manoah, he struggled in the first inning. He was a little too hyped up. Left some pitches over the plate, gave up the home run to Kyle Raleigh. It just felt like that was not the right guy to throw. And you know, you look at that Game 2, and I mean, it just everything kind of broke wrong. I was listening to a podcast earlier. They were talking about how if Toronto, that Game 1 was so important, because if the Blue Jays had won Game 1, there's no chance in hell the Mariners come back in Game 2 when they get down big. Like they would have just been broken. But there's just something about having won that Game 1, and having to force Game 3, and and honestly, Toronto, I mean, they were overthinking things. Pretty sure they pulled Gausman like really early, and
He went
I don't
5
know.
2/3 and gave up 4.
Yeah, didn't they
Yeah,
didn't
he
they
was.
pull him like with a couple guys own and the bullpen came up and gave up the runs or something? But
He
I don't
he
know.
he was over 100 pitches when they pulled him.
Yeah.
Misa came in and did give up one, but then it was later in the next inning when Anthony Bass came in and gave up three.
Yeah. Oh, my Miza gave up a home run to Santana, right? And then that was like 3 runs. So two of them
Yeah,
were to Gossman. Yeah. So, I mean, that was I thought that maybe you let Gossman finish that inning, but um, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, you can second guess yourself as much as you want to. If they had left Gossman in and he had given up a home run himself, then people would have been saying he left him in too long. But yeah, I mean, I would have pitched Gossman game one and maybe Manoa game two. But yeah, I mean, Toronto. I mean, it's they didn't do enough in the bullpen this year. They didn't bring in enough guys. I thought that Jordan Romano had a good year, but like you really needed more guys in that bullpen. So maybe next year, looking forward to them, they'll do that a little bit more. But what a series, and hats off to the Mariners. That comeback was insane. So good for them, and I think the Mariners they're going to be a pretty tough out for the Astros. They're pretty familiar with each other, and I worry a little bit about the Mariners pitching. But I will say that with the fact that the Mariners didn't have to play a third game, being able to start Logan Gilbert in Game 1 is a big deal because I think that means they can get Gilbert, then go back to Castillo in Game 2, which is very good for them. So we'll see what they're able to do.
yeah, I absolutely can't wait for Seattle's home playoff game if when it gets
Yeah,
there. Like that T-Mobile Park is going to be one of the loudest stadiums we'll have seen. Um, but jumping over to the one series that went 3 games, and that was the San Diego Padres versus the New York Mets. Game one, the Padres jump all over Max Scherzer and score. What was it? I know Grisham got a homer. I think they scored two in the first, and then one in the second, and then four in the fifth. Just to really put that thing out of reach. At that time, it was 7-0. The Mets were able to score one there, but they just really got nothing going in that one. Game two, they got the start from Jacob DeGrom. The Padres actually got a pretty good start from Blake Snell as well. He was a little wild at times. He had 6 walks, but he was able to limit them to 2 runs. Martinez came up, gave a run, and then Morihone, they put him in later. He gave up 4. The Mets were able to win game 2, 7-3. And then looking at that third game was last night. Joe Musgrove, the absolute story of this: 7 innings, 1 hit, 5 strikeouts, just absolutely dominated that. I mean, they were calling for substance check on his ear at one point. The Mets were just trying to get some momentum, and then in that game, the Padres jumped right over Chris Bassett early on in the game.
yeah. This series was pretty crazy. Game one. I mean, the Padres did the same thing to Scherzer that had happened when they faced off the Braves and the week before in a must-win game, and it's like Scherzer's had some moments over the past several years in the postseason where he's been a little bit not as dominant as regular. See, I won't say he's been bad because he hadn't been bad in the postseason, but I mean he has a career 3.60 ERA in the postseason, which compared to his 3.11 in the regular season is a much higher. Obviously, you're playing better teams in the postseason, so that's part of it too. But um, you know, last year you had the whole dead arm thing. This year you had the oblique injuries twice. That if when you build your team out of 36, 37-year-old free agents who might still be fantastic pitchers, like Max Scherzer had a fantastic year, but you're put yourself vulnerable to stuff like this. And I don't know if he was fully 100%, late in the season into the postseason, and he got victimized by the home run ball in into the regular season and early in the postseason here, and that's what happened in Game 1. I mean, you look at the Padres. They had Yu Darvish pitched well, and I don't know if the Mets were going to win that game, even if Scherzer pitched to Jim. But then Game 2, I mean, I think the Padres walked like 12 guys or something in Game 2, but the Mets were able to kind of use their approach that had been kind of their calling card this year. They don't give up at bats. They walk a lot. They put the ball in play. They were able to use that against Blake Snell and the bullpen. Morejon really got lit up in Game 2. uh, they were able to use that to their advantage. And in Game 3, I mean, um, Chris Bassett has just seemed, this happened in last week's Game 2. He just kind of lost it, and I just don't think he's that guy. Like, he's a good pitcher, but I don't know if he's like a postseason killer. And Musgrove is a great pitcher though, and I was surprised that he didn't pitch game 1 or 2 when they released the schedule. I guess maybe because he had to pitch late in the season to clinch their spot, but I was surprised that he didn't pitch game 1 or 2. But he had a great finish to game 3. And I tell you what, I was not happy about Buck Showalter asking for that substance check, because you know what, you need to be, if you're going to ask for that, they need to change some rules on that, because all he knew that he wasn't using a substance. He just wanted to throw the pitcher off, and they don't need to be abusing that rule that was put in place to make it fair, so the pitchers weren't using foreign substances. They don't need to be abusing that to try to throw the pitcher off and get an advantage on them. In fact, it's kind of ironic about this series, um, but the Mets did the same thing. I mean, not the Mets. Scherzer had the same thing done to him a couple years ago by Girardi, and they had that big issue. So, like, I think that's kind of ridiculous, if you ask me, that Buck Showalter's out there trying to do that. And then, I mean, the whole Game 3 too. Like, I mean, how are you? And I mean, this is probably part of me, the Braves fan talking, but how do you not sell out Game 3 of a postseason series too? Like, they didn't sell out an elimination game in the postseason on a Sunday. Like, I don't know. That was surprising to me. But anyways, obviously for the Mets, you won 101 games. They had a good season, but the Padres, nobody's really given too much credit to the Padres. I want to give them a little bit of credit. They did great in this series. They had a plan. They came in and they hit one of the best pitchers in baseball in Game 1. And they hit DeGrom too. They scored 2 runs off of him. I mean, that's pretty good for facing DeGrom. And then they came out in Game 3 and just torched Bassett and the Mets, and ended the team's 100-win season. So good for the Padres, and it'll be interesting to see them move on.
So just to wrap up on your couple little things there, the reason they didn't pitch Musgrove in Game 2 is because they were hoping to save him for the first game of the next series. Since they had won Game 1, if they had lost Game 1, Musgrove was going to go in 2 for that one. And the whole thing, the substance check was, it was going around Twitter, so I'm sure Buck Showalter and them found out some way. There was a picture of Musgrove's ear that looked like it had some substance on it that was floating around. So I'm sure somebody from the front office or somebody with the Mets organization saw that and then relayed that down there. That's why they specifically went out there and checked his ear, is because there was a photo that they showed, that like the broadcast showed, of his ear being extremely shiny. So, I mean, part of it was probably still to throw him off, but there was some reason of it. It wasn't just that he was just doing that at that point. There was a little bit of evidence, at least, to say that they should check for that. But go ahead, David, to talk on the series.
The other thing I saw was that Andrew McCutchen said it was a thing called red hot, kind of like an icy hot type substance that isn't sticky or anything, but it burns your ears and gives you a little like extra adrenaline because it's bugging you, and it gives it activates your brain, keeps you focused.
The old Jake Peavy method.
Yeah, like, so, I don't know.
It's like smelling salts.
Yeah, like I think Musgrove's probably the type of guy to use something like that too. He's very hot-headed, kind of an aggressive guy. One of those, what do you call him, like a Scherzer maniac on the mound is Musgrove, and it's good to see him and Yu Darvish really excelling in this series. Those two guys are really awesome pitchers and well deserving of the titles that they're getting, the accolades they're going to be getting the rest of the season, and the contracts they're on. But man, I tell you what, I told you about the Mets, man. They are. Steve Cohen bought this team, spent a lot of money in the offseason. They were the offseason winners. All that they spent on Starling Marte, who didn't play in the series. Mark Canha.
He did.
He did. He was back.
Yeah,
Marte played.
Back.
Wow.
He was their best hitter, I think.
Never mind.
He had a splint on his finger, and he was grimacing every swing, but he played.
Alrighty then. Well, Marte was great this year too, for what it's worth. But you get into the offseason, they win the offseason, right? And they sign Scherzer and all this, and then they comes the trade deadline, and they're in a battle. They're a couple games up, 5-6 games up, but that's dropped from June, and the Mets said, "Nah, we're good. They didn't want to trade with anybody. They didn't give up any prospects. They got Darren Ruff, who was terrible in the regular season, and
Ooh,
now we
Bob.
come down to the end of it, and you don't have enough hitting. They one hit in the final game for the
Yeah,
Mets lineup. They didn't have any offense.
and remember when they traded Darren Ruff? Remember who they traded? They traded a big leaguer for him, and J.D.
Yeah,
Davis. And I'm
and
pretty sure
he went
J.D.
nuts.
Davis, yeah, like, and I'd said at the time, I was like, why are you doing this? You're just trading Darren Ruff for another Darren Ruff, like, or you're trading
Right.
J.D. Davis for another J.D. Davis. And I mean, J.D. Davis when he was with the Mets this year was good at the plate. He had a above average hitter, and then I mean, he wasn't great, but he had a 102
Yeah.
WRC plus with the Mets, and then with the Giants, he had a 142. Of course, it was BABIP aided, but still, I mean, he's every bit as good as a player as Darren Ruff is. I mean, and that's not a slide on Darren Ruff. I mean, I think they're both perfectly fine DH type players, but like, I never understood that trade, and it seems like it kind of bit them too. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I will say one thing about the Mets, and I'm a Braves fan, and I will say one thing: the Mets won 101 games. I mean, let's not act like they weren't like a top three team in the NL. And I mean, you play a 3-game series after winning 101 games. If they were in the NL Central, they would have won 110 games. I mean, it's like they were a really good team. They lost to the defending world champions, who are really good too, by 1 game or in a tie technically. And then, they weren't as good as the Dodgers, obviously, but like I mean, there's not a ton more they could have done. I mean, maybe they could have maybe they could have made a trade at the deadline, but another trade. But it's not like there's. I mean, I don't know. Like, they had a great team this year. Part of it's just when you are in a division with another great team and you end up just barely missing out on the winning the division, and you get stuck playing a 3-game series against another really good team. It's like that's tough. So I will say that about
Well,
the Mets. It's a lot of unfortunate business for them too. So
that's the thing, right? Though, is that it was so close. They were a player away, right? If you take Darren Ruff and make him Wilson Contreras or some equivalent, hitter that is not that is above league average and plays a decent defensive position, they are probably a game or two ahead of the Braves, and then they're in the bye, and then they're
yeah,
that's the kind of thing that mattered in July. But they were up, on the Braves by a lot, and the Braves
yeah,
played 700 baseball for the whole second half,
yeah.
and obviously you can't control that, but you have to stay ahead. You have to be aggressive when you have the opportunity, and this Mets team was probably the best Mets team of this little window that they're going to have,
No
right? I
doubt.
mean, Degrom's a free agent this year.
Edwin
Um,
Diaz,
yeah,
Demo.
Diaz is
Brandon
a free agent this
Nimmo,
year.
um,
So
Trevor
how
May's
much
a free
longer?
agent, even though he had a rough year. He had about a lot of injury, but
How
yeah,
much long? And they've got Francisco Alvarez coming up, who looks like a pretty competent guy at age 20, who can probably lock down catcher for him. But man, it just feels like a missed opportunity for the Mets, especially when you win 100 games. And that's my thing. It's that I think the Mets were complacent in the middle of the season, and it cost them here in October, where we're seeing things that happened in June and July come back to bite them. And it's like what Pete Alonso said. I mean, they got swept by the Cubs like 2 weeks before the season
yeah.
ended, and that allowed the Braves to pass them. And then they
Yeah.
lost all three to the Braves, or 2 of 3 to the Braves, and
They lost all
there it
three.
is.
All
Yeah,
they had to do was win 1 game,
yep,
and they got swept. And they had Scherzer and Degrom on the mound in 2 of them.
yeah. Just
Yeah.
the Mets had their opportunities. Not to take anything away from the Padres, but it feels like the Mets gave this up on all the fronts. Um, just to mention, Manny Machado MVP level season continues on in the postseason. Hope he does great.
Yeah,
Cronenworth's good.
it
Ha-Seong
is
Kim
worth.
was really good this year.
I was
Padres
gonna
are going
say
to be fun.
it's
You know,
worth
we're still going
noting
to
on.
talk about them.
I was gonna say it's worth noting on Machado that he did seem kind of banged up at the end of the game yesterday. Like, he kind of had an awkward swing and was favoring his leg a little bit. And I don't know if I haven't heard anything about him not being healthy, but he didn't seem fully like 100% at the end of the game. So hopefully he's not hurt. But that was something I kind of noticed. So
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how he responds on Tuesday. But let's go ahead and jump over to the division series that we're going to have starting tomorrow. Going to have 4 games, but we'll go ahead and start with the Phillies and the Braves series. And I know, Matt, where you're going on this one, so give us a little breakdown and then your prediction.
Yeah, so with the Phillies and the Braves, I think that this is going to be a really interesting series. Obviously, these teams are very familiar with each other. The Braves went 11-8 against the Phillies this year, so it was actually a pretty tight this year. Games 1 and 2 are going to be in Atlanta. One thing that the Phillies don't have is a lot of rotation depth. They have their top 2 guys, so I think one of the things that kind of hurts the Phillies is the fact that you know Wheeler and Nola both had to pitch in the wild card rounds. They're not going to be available for Game 1, and I think Game 2. Okay, Wheeler is going to be ready for Game 2. So, Ranger Suarez is going to pitch Game 1 for him. And Ranger Suarez had a good year too. But, the Braves have Max Fried lined up. I think a few of the keys to this series are going to be the Braves are going to have to do a good job working counts on Nola and Wheeler because I still think the Phillies bullpen, I know they've been a little bit better this year than they have been in the past, but I still think their bullpen is very vulnerable. And and then for the Braves to be able to and for the bullpen, the Braves bullpen to kind of shut them down and do the same thing they did last year, but in the postseason. But yeah, I mean, you look at the matchups, and the Phillies really need to take Game 1 or 2 in Atlanta because I think you're kind of if you're the Phillies, you're banking on Nola and Wheeler winning their games. If you're going to win the series, you have to have Wheeler and Nola win their games and then try to find a way to win one other game. Like if you're the Phillies, and if you're the Braves, you take care of business in Game 1, and then obviously you'd like to take one of the 2 games against Wheeler and Nola, but um, you probably only gonna have to face each of those guys one time, so you're not gonna have to beat them. You would obviously it makes it a lot easier if you beat one of those guys, but you don't really have to. Um, but I think one other thing too, and we'll talk about this guy a little bit more, but Spencer Strider, he's been out for the last couple weeks of the regular season with I think it's a lat strain, slight. It wasn't a real bad injury, but he sounds like he's gonna pitch, but we don't know how much. So I think they're still playing it day by day on how much he's gonna be able to pitch. But games 1 and 2 will probably be Freed, right, and then depends on Strider for Game 3. Like if you get Charlie Morton for Game 3, if Strider's not really ready. Part of it probably depends on where the series is at too. If you're down 0-2, you might just throw out Strider and get what you can out of him. But Charlie Morton's kind of struggled down the stretch, so that'll be interesting to look at. But this is gonna be a really interesting series, and I think that my pick would probably be the Braves in 4. I think that the Braves win Game 1, and then they split when Nola and Wheeler face the Braves. I think they'll split. The Braves will split those 2 games, and then the Braves will win a Game 4. So I think that's going to be my pick there. But I would not be shocked if the Phillies come in and are able to win this series because the Phillies do have a really good lineup. And there's a scenario where if Strider doesn't pitch, the Braves run out Charlie Morton, who's struggled down the stretch, and then have like a bullpen game in Game 4. And all the Phillies really need to do is win their top 2 guys starts, and then pick off a bullpen game or something. So I could see a scenario where the Phillies win for sure. This is gonna be a lot tighter series than people really are probably gonna expect it to be. So, but I am gonna take the Braves in this one.
I'll also mention that Spencer Strider just picked up
Yep.
a 6-year, $75 million extension from the Braves, which is going to just pay him through his arbitration years. Basically,
It buys out. It's got a club option, and it buys out a free agent year with the 6 years, and then the club option is a 7th year. So
there you go.
buys out 2 free agent years.
Yeah, which is good. I think that's ideal for a young player to get locked up, especially one with a volatile pitching repertoire. And Spencer Strider throws 100 miles an hour. You take the guaranteed money now. I mean, he's been pitching lights out this season. I wager he'll get used like a pitching weapon. Like kind of the way the Braves were using their guys last year. The 3 inning. Uh, you know, one time through the order, and then they try to use him more than once in the series. would be my guess, where they kind of try to keep the pitches down but use him a good bit anyway. Uh, and if that's the case, I think the Braves won't have too much trouble with the Phillies. But the difference maker is going to be whether or not I think Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber can get some home runs off of that Braves starting pitching. If the Bryce Harper put the Phillies out ahead in that St. Louis game and it put all the pressure on St. Louis, those two are going to have to catalyze the Phillies offense. No better guys to do it than those two. But in a increasingly home run centric offensive postseason set of baseball games, Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber are going to be the key factors, I think, for Philadelphia. Whereas, the Braves' whole entire offense can kind of hit those home runs. They haven't really had one guy um, being the power bat, as it were. They've just had a bunch of, Austin Riley, Dansby Swanson, Matt Olson. They're all very capable of hitting home runs at any point. Philly lineup kind of runs through those two big lefties. So I'm looking for those two. If they don't get going, this is going to be a quick series. If they get off and start hitting some home runs, I think the Phillies are going to hang around. My pick's probably going to be the Braves. Just I think they're a better team. They're going to play better defense. Dansby Swanson's probably a Gold Glove shortstop. Michael Harris is a Gold Glove center fielder. They got Matt Olson might be a Gold Glove first baseman if not for the existence of the former Brave that he replaced. It's just a better team, I think. But in 5 games, anything can happen. We saw that with the Padres beating the Mets. So don't count the Phillies out. They're gonna have to get big offense.
Yeah,
It's what's gonna have to happen.
one other note in the series that I was, we are talking about the pitching and stuff. I mean, you look at the bullpens. I mean, the Braves have 3
Mm-hmm.
closers. Raisel Iglesias,
Right.
since the trade in July, has given up 2 runs as a Brave in like 30 innings. I mean,
Wow.
Jansen, who's back on his horse. Minter's been fantastic this year. And then the Phillies were closing out games in the wild card with Zach Eflin. So I mean, just kind of throw into perspective. I know the Phillies have a couple other guys too, David Robertson and Alvarado and stuff. But I'm just just kind of put in perspective the difference in the bullpens here. I think that's gonna be a big deal. So because in postseason baseball, a lot of it's become about the bullpens now. So
Yeah, and that's the clear advantage Atlanta has is the consistency in the bullpen, the ability to throw out, Colin McHugh, AJ Minter, Iglesias, Jansen. I mean, and that's just the first 4 you can name right there. Where Alvarado for the Phillies has been hit or miss. Knable for them has been hit or miss. Robinson has been pretty solid, but you just never know. If he's going to be hit or miss there. And overall, Atlanta is just a much better offensive team. I mean, I like Bryce Harper and I like Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, but Atlanta you got Michael Harris, Acuna, Olson, Dansby, Austin Riley. They're just so balanced through that entire lineup. Any one of those can impact and win you a game right away, pretty much. And I'm also going to go with Atlanta here. I think it's going to be the first time we've all agreed on one pick. But the Phillies are a good team. They are. I picked them to beat the Cardinals. I like them in this series. I think it's going to go to a 4 or 5 game series, but I just think Atlanta is too strong top to bottom at the end of the day through the rotation, through the bullpen, and through the lineup. I just think overall they're a better team. So I'm going to pick the Braves as well. But moving on to our second series that we're going to have, it's going to be the Seattle Mariners versus the Houston Astros. Another battle of division foes, this time on the American League side. So, David, why don't you go ahead and start with this one and give us your prediction?
Yeah, we kind of mentioned the Mariners feel like a team of destiny, don't they? I mean, getting into the postseason on a walk-off home run for the first time since 2001, and you look at that postseason in 2001, they won 116 regular season games and then end up losing. So I'm looking for a bit of destiny. I think you got Logan Gilbert. You're going to see Robbie Ray again. You're going to see Luis Castillo again. You're probably going to see Marco Gonzalez in this series. I wonder if they won't try to get George Kirby back into the rotation or back into a multi-inning role. He closed out game 2, and he was very, very, very good. So my kind of question for the Mariners is going to be who's that third guy behind Castillo, behind Gilbert. Is Robbie Ray going to be able to get back to that Cy Young form against another pretty righty heavy Astros lineup featuring Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, Jordan's a lefty but he hits everybody, so Kyle Tucker, can Robbie Ray be effective against them? Is maybe the biggest question I think of this whole series, because I think Gilbert can shut him down. I think Castillo will shut him down. It's really going to be about that Seattle bullpen. It's going to be about Robbie Ray getting to those games and getting into the bullpen of the Astros um, on the offensive side. I Justin Verlander's about to pitch in the postseason at age 39. Is he worn out? I don't know. This Astros offense is really, really scary. They're a very, very good team. They're a number one seed for a reason. They won 106 games, which is only getting overlooked because the Dodgers won like 111. It would be folly to pick against the Astros. Folly. So I won't do it. I'll pick the Astros, but there's definitely a path for Seattle. It's tough. I really want to pick Seattle, but Houston's just so good. I think this one's a 5-gamer no matter what.
Yeah, I think coming into the series, I mean, really the only spot that the Mariners can really say that they're as good as the Astros in a specific part of the team is in the starting rotation, or is in the is in the bullpen. Because I don't think either team has a great bullpen. I think the Mariners have a good bullpen. I think the Astros have a good bullpen, but and the Mariners I think they're really just kind of one pitcher short on the starting pitching side of having as good of a postseason rotation as the Astros have. Astros rotation's a lot deeper, but I mean, you look at, Logan Gilbert's really good, Castillo's really good, but I mean, the Astros are gonna be able to throw out Verlander and then Jordan. Framber Valdez, game two, who obviously had been up and down a little bit the postseason last year. I mean, he got rocked in the World Series, but in the championship series, I think he threw like 8 scoreless innings twice or something. So he's been hit or miss in the playoffs in the past, but he's had a great year. You got Garcia, you got McCullers. I mean, the Astros are so deep in their rotation, and then that lineup is just really good. I mean, you talk about having, Altuve, who had a fantastic year that nobody's talking about, Bregman, who had a great second half and had a really good year, Alvarez, Tucker, Jeremy Pena had a good year. I mean, you look at Christian Vasquez is a very experienced postseason player who's going to catch for them. Trey Mancini is going to be out there first time in the postseason. I mean, this is a really, really, really good Astros lineup, and I just don't think the Mariners are as deep. I know they got Julio Rodriguez, who is great. I know they've got Ty France, who's really good. They've got great contributions from Eugenio Suarez, and Cal Riley. They've had some really good players, but I can't imagine the Astros losing this series. I think it'll probably be over. It's hard to pick a sweep. I'll say Astros in 4, but I think that it's going to be really tough for the Mariners to be able to beat the Astros in this series. It really is, especially with the fact that Robbie Ray, especially with the fact that you kind of like, I mean, well, I guess their pitchers will be on regular rest, and you can get Gilbert out there twice, but I think the Astros, they're well rested. I think they're going to win, even though I really like this Mariners team.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough series. I think Houston and Seattle have played each other tough for the past couple years, really. This Houston team is so good. I mean, I came into the year and I thought they were going to have their drop off. I thought the loss of Correa would be a much bigger loss, and Pena stepped up and took over that role. I thought Justin Verlander at age 39, coming off Tommy John surgery, what was he going to look like? Well, he looked like the best Justin Verlander we've ever seen. Framber Valdez took that step. He broke the record for quality starts, most consecutive quality starts in a season at like 25 or 26 now. You got McCullers back now since August, and he's looked really, really good. I think he ended the year on 4 or 5 straight quality starts as well. Jordan, we know what he is, an absolute beast. Kyle Tucker. I mean, this team, they got Trey Mancini as well, who in Houston just absolutely crushes the ball. this team is so good, and yet I still feel like the Mariners have a chance. I still feel like the Mariners are that team this year that are just gonna. There's always one team that takes that surprise deep postseason run. And the resiliency they showed, they jumped on the Blue Jays early, and then in game one, and then in game two, fighting back from down that much. This team just has that magic around them this year, and it's probably stupid to pick them over Houston, but I'm gonna do it anyways. There's something about this team. There's something about having Julio Rodriguez this year, Logan Gilbert, Luis Castillo looks really good. If you're willing to throw George Kirby out there, he might even be better in this series than Robbie Ray. Um, but there's something about the Seattle team and the fight that they never give up in a game that just makes me want to pick them. So I'm going to pick Seattle over Houston.
Yes. Yes. I
All right.
feel it.
But let's go ahead and transition on to our other American League matchup, and it's going to be the Cleveland Guardians against the New York Yankees.
Yeah, I look at this series and I think like the Yankees have so many. They've got such an advantage just in talent in this series, but I tell you, there's something about the Yankees in especially the last few years in the postseason that it feels like the pressure gets to them, and it might have happened with the Mets a little bit too, that New York pressure, and I just don't feel like they handle it all that well. Like Garrett Cole has been a completely different pitcher in the postseason than he's been in the regular season since he got to New York. Um, and I I am gonna pick the Yankees. I feel like they're gonna win. Feel like they're just the deeper, better team. But man, there's a lot of holes with this team. I mean, you know, there's really not that many guys in their lineup that truly scare you behind Judge. I mean, Rizzo is good, but like, I mean, I know they got some guys, but like, I mean, they're gonna be running out there Oswaldo Cabrera, Oswaldo Peraza. I'm not really scared of Gleyber Torres. You look at like their Harrison Bader playing center field. He's good. He's a good player, but like and then their bullpen is scary. I mean, they've got like a shell of themselves in their bullpen, and they really struggled in the second half of the season. I know they finished strong, but I feel like this is going to be a lot more competitive than people think. But the one difference is that the Guardians are not going to be able to pitch Shane Bieber twice because he had to pitch in the wild card, and I just don't know if their pitching is going to hold up over a 5-game series. Already having had to throw some of their guys in the wild card. Um, Cal Quantrill starting game one. He had a good year. He had a 3.38 ERA. I just don't know about him against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium in a postseason game. So I think I'm gonna pick the Yankees, but I think this series actually goes 4 or 5 games. I think it's gonna be a lot more competitive than people might think. So, but I am gonna pick the Yankees.
Well, you forgot about the Yankees getting their best player back from injury and Matt Carpenter, who
Well,
out WRC plus Aaron Judge this year. In limited time, obviously, but I just the Yankees lineup is you kind of talked it down, but Harrison Bader's a really good defensive center fielder, and he's going to be replacing Aaron Hicks, who is kind of dropped drastically in his effect in center field. You've got great defense at shortstop in Kiner Falefa. You're going to have good defense in left in Benintendi, right? You're going to have good defense at first in Rizzo. DJ LeMahieu's on the infield. He's always a good defensive player. And you've got Jose Trevino, who ended up being the number 2 Yankees player in WAR behind Aaron Judge because of his defensive prowess at catcher. I like the Yankees to play good fundamental defense in this game, in this series, because the Cleveland offense is not home run happy. It hits a lot of ground balls. They do a lot of little base running tactics. Going to have Jose Trevino keeping those guys off base. You're going to have, Garrett Cole is a home run prone type of pitcher, but this lineup is not the type of lineup that can really hurt him. This is the kind of lineup that Garrett Cole can mow through. I like the Yankees in this series because of the defense, which is weird to say because you'd think with the lineup that there's a lot of firepower, as Judge with 62 homers, you'd say, oh, it's the offense that's going to carry the Yankees. I think it's the defense that carries the Yankees in this series, which it needs to. I think their pitching is actually probably overall a little bit worse than the Guardians, but Bieber won't be able to start twice. Cole will be able to start twice. I got the Yankees in this one. If I was going to pick a sweep, I think it'd be this one. It's going to be tough on the Guardians because their lineup is so slap happy. Miles Straw is not the kind of guy who's going to get eaten up by a Harrison Bader in the outfield, where he can't get those little pop flies to fall in, and where he can kind of be a terror on the base paths. And it's like him up and down that lineup, with the exception of Jose Ramirez. So give me the Yankees in this one. I think it's their defense that carries them instead of maybe the offense.
So as far as this series is concerned, looking at it, you come in and you say the Yankees are the team to the clear team to pick here. And then if you look into it a little bit more, I think you could talk yourself into the Guardians. We've seen the team. Garrett Cole, right? He's shown the ability to get hit in the postseason, to get hit in Yankee Stadium. Even when Garrett Cole's not mowing through people, he tends to, to give up mistakes, and he tends to try and battle too hard and try and prove himself too much, and he gets hit that way. This Guardians team I feel like it's a bad matchup for him because they have a lot of people who don't strike out a lot. I mean, you got Steven Kwan, Miles Straw, Jose Ramirez. Those are all guys who will fight pitches off, who will make you pitch deep into every at bat, get your pitch count up high. And I think the real problem here is the Yankees bullpen. They have so many injuries in there, and now we're having drama with the Aroldis Chapman. He's not even with the team. His Yankees career is over because he didn't show up to a workout, and because they weren't going to guarantee him a spot on the postseason roster. They weren't sure yet, so he just said, "I'm not coming." And you're losing that guy. You've already lost Britton. You've have a lot of other injuries down there as well in that bullpen. I'm just as good as the Cleveland bullpen and starting pitching is. I feel like the starting pitching can compete with New York, and I feel like the bullpen is a lot better, that they might be able to keep New York at bay. I feel like it might be a low scoring series here, and in those games, I just feel like Cleveland has the advantage, and I'm going to go Cleveland over the Yankees here. There's just something about I trust the bullpen enough with Cleveland and the pitching staff in general to give them a little bit of that edge over the Yankees. They're going to need Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton to have big series here, and that's really what it's going to come down to. But I'm going to go Cleveland over the Yankees. But let's transition over to our last series we have, and it's another divisional matchup. Three of the four series we have in the division series are divisional games. It's going to be the San Diego Padres against the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Yeah, when it comes to this one, I think that the Dodgers are like 13-5 against the Padres this year or something.
14-5, yeah.
14-5, yeah. So obviously the Dodgers have dominated the Padres this year, and I think that this series would be a lot closer, except that the Padres just had to throw their three guys. And honestly, games 1 and 2 for the Padres are going to be really, really tough because they're kind of taxed from the weekend. And I guess Darvish will probably be able to start game 2. I don't think they've announced.
They have
announced Darvish in game 2.
Yeah,
It's
Clevenger's game 1.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Clevenger versus Urias. I mean, anything can happen in baseball, especially in one game. But I mean, if the Dodgers are going to win game 1 against Clevenger with Urias. I mean, Clevenger hadn't been fully healthy this year. He hadn't had a great year in general, like a 4.33 ERA. The Dodgers have one of their top guys on the mound, Julio Urias. He's been great. The Dodgers lineup is incredible. You really have to have deep elite pitching to have a chance against the Dodgers. And I just don't think the Padres have that depth in their pitching. Like, one thing the Dodgers will do to you, and we've seen it for years, is they'll just run, if they don't like the starter they're facing, they'll just run up his pitch count and get him out in the 5th inning. And really the only chance you have against them is if you can run a really deep bullpen out there too. And I just don't think the Padres have that depth in their bullpen. They got a couple really good ones in their bullpen, but I just don't think they have the depth. So we'll see what happens. But I'd be shocked if the Dodgers don't win this series. And I mean, I think it'll be 4 games. That I think the Dodgers will have one game where one of their starters, because there are question marks with Kershaw because of his health in the past and his postseason history. And then you've got, like, you're probably going to end up having to throw Tyler Anderson and or in like a Gonsolin, who's been hurt a lot late in the season. Like, I think one of the Dodgers starters will have a bad outing in a game, but I do think that the Dodgers will win the rest of the games. I just don't see a way that the Padres are able to, you know, beat the Dodgers in a 5-game series. It's gonna be tough. So, but we'll see what happens. You know, you never know with these divisional matchups, and especially these rivalry games and rivalry matchups and stuff. You just never know. It's baseball, so it'll be an entertaining series to watch.
There's a path for the
Yeah.
Padres. I think it comes from Manny Machado, uh, really being able to lead that offense, and those guys being able to hit around Tyler Anderson and then one of Kershaw or Urias, and then getting it to an injured Gonsolin and trying to, get through the bullpen. There's a path for the Padres for me, but Freddie Freeman had a 7 wins above replacement season this year. Mookie Betts and Trey Turner were right behind him in terms of wins above replacement. Will Smith was great again. I just they've got like Trace Thompson coming off the bench hitting a ton of home runs. Max Muncy's been good again. Justin Turner was good again. I just don't know that the Padres can shut down the Dodgers for long enough to outscore them. It's going to have to be high scoring, like 7-8 runs by the Padres in order to even have a chance, I think. And getting 7 to 8 runs against the Dodgers 3 times in a span of, 5 games it's going to be really difficult. That's the path. I could see it. The Padres offense is good, but it hasn't been reliable. And you need reliability to beat this Dodgers team because they are very reliable. They will score those 5 to 6 runs per game against you. You're going to have to find a way to scrape across runs. You're going to need those big home runs from some of those guys. I worry that the Padres are maybe the most exhausted team. They did play the 3 games, whereas everybody else played 2. This is an easy Dodgers pick for me. The path is there, but it seems the least likely of any of these 3 series is to be an upset. I've got Dodgers 3 games. They'll break down the Padres. They tend to do that every year anyway.
So there's the path that you mentioned for San Diego. The path is survive game 1, try and find a way, and then rely on your 3 people in Darvish, Snell, and Musgrove through the next 3. And the all of those guys have dominated the Dodgers this year. I mean, Darvish, Snell, Musgrove. I think Snell had one of his blow up games against the Dodgers, but in his career, he's been very, very good against them. Uh, Musgrove, we just saw he was absolutely elite, and he's proven that against the Dodgers this year. The Dodgers need to make sure that Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, and Freddie Freeman are locked in and back to their potential, because the last 3 weeks of the season, really, they weren't hitting. Those 3 guys really kind of went into a slump, especially Trey Turner and Freddie Freeman, or Trey Turner and Mookie Betts. Sorry, Freeman was pretty consistent there, but they need to make sure those guys are locked in. You've seen Justin Turner, Max Muncy really rejuvenate themselves in the back half of the season. Over those last 3 weeks, Cody Bellinger really started to improve as well. He had a lot better at bats. He was driving the ball well. He plays really good defense in the outfield. The meta for the Philly or for the Padres here is going to be survive game 1, figure out a way. The Dodgers have faced Clevenger 3 times this year. He's given up 4 runs, and 5 runs in 3 games. So they need to find a way to survive with Clevenger. If it's one time through the lineup and then go to the bullpen, that's what they're going to have to do. You're going to have to score off Julio Urias, who was the National League ERA leader this year. At home, he's even more untouchable. It's going to come down to which Juan Soto are you getting, which Josh Bell are you getting, because those 2 are going to be the key people there. We know Manny Machado will have an impact. We've seen Trent Grisham have good at-bats against those guys. We've seen Ha-Seong Kim play really good against Kershaw and Urias. He's better against lefties. You need Bell and Soto to really come up big in this series if the Padres want the chance to win. But I just I know this is the Dodger fan in me. I just think the Dodgers are too deep. I mean, even the questions in the rotation behind Kershaw and Urias. You're going to go to Gonsolin or Anderson or maybe Dustin May with some piggyback with Andrew Heaney in there. But really for that, it's going to be one time, maybe a start of a second time through the lineup. And then you're going to go to that bullpen, which everyone in that bullpen has been lights out this year. I mean, you're supposed to be getting Blake Trinan back now. You're going to have Evan Phillips, who's been one of the best relievers in baseball. Brusdar Graterol's come back and looked amazing. The bullpen is really, really deep here. I think much deeper than the San Diego bullpen. So it's going to come down to, can San Diego survive the first game and then get deep pitching performances from their other three guys and shut down this deep Dodgers offense? And then on the Padres offensive side, they need to see Juan Soto step up and be the Juan Soto that everyone knows. And they need the Josh Bell from the first half with the Washington Nationals. Because if they don't have those guys, if they have the Soto who struggled, if they have the Snell who blows up games, they have the Josh Bell who hit 236 with the Padres through his time there, they're not going to be able to succeed against this Dodgers team because they're just way too deep.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely with you.
Yep.
So I guess it's obvious there. My predictions: the Dodgers over the Padres in that one. But that'll wrap it up for our division series predictions. So David, you went with Atlanta, Houston, Yankees, and LA. Matt, you went with Atlanta, Houston, Yankees, and LA. Matt and David with the exact same predictions there. If I don't know if you saw David's predictions from the first round, Matt, I'm not sure that's the best thing you want to do there. But then I went with Atlanta, Seattle, Cleveland, and LA as well on that one. But before we wrap it up, I know we've gone really long here, but on this episode, it's kind of a milestone episode. We'll keep it a little short, but I just wanted to mention that this episode is episode 100 in the Batflip podcast, I guess, history, if you want to say. It's a cool milestone, something that when I was first talking to this with David and Matt, I never thought I'd get to this point. It's gone a lot longer than I've expected. It's got a lot better than I expected it would ever be. And it's just a big milestone, at least from my eyes. And I thank everyone that supports us. And I just can't say enough about it. Here's to another 100 or how many ever episodes we're going to get to.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Just I can't believe I had no idea that we had been up to 100. But you think about it, and I mean, we started in 2020, right before the pandemic shortened season started. So we've just completed our third season of baseball, right, or at least regular season baseball, doing this, which is kind of crazy. I hadn't even realized, like, time flies, man. I had not realized that we'd been doing this that long. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm happy to do it. I enjoy talking baseball, and I think enjoy talking baseball, especially with y'all, and it's a lot of fun to do, and I appreciate everybody out there for the support. So.
And I know I'm new and I haven't been a part of all 100 episodes, but I am really proud of you guys, and I've already listened to you a number of times, and obviously that's what kind of drew me to wanting to participate as much as I can, and I appreciate being able to.
Absolutely. Well, we'll wrap up this show. Get some division series baseball. Going to start tomorrow with 4 games. Then I think we have 2 more on Wednesday, and then through the weekend we'll have a bunch of games there. Some of them could be wrapped up. Again, I mean, games 4 and 5 are on Sunday, so it's going to be exciting. We should have a lot of the outcomes actually by the time we talk to you guys next week. Or actually, we should have all of the outcomes by the time we talk to you guys next week. So look for exciting times of the division series, and enjoy the postseason baseball because it's going to be fun and electric. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks.